In the previous exercise, we have seen how we can implement an application as multiple containers communicating over a network. We also created a user-defined network there and then connected the containers to that network and thus allowing the containers to communicate with each other. Let's take a brief look at networking support in Docker. So the document behind me contains more details, a link to which will be provided in the description. And as stated here, the reason Docker containers are powerful is that you can implement your application as multiple containers and then be able to communicate with each other. So how exactly is Docker support for containers implemented? So the Docker networking subsystem is completely implemented in software which is running in the Docker daemon, and this implements 5 different kinds of networks support. We have a bridge, which is the default network driver. We are going to look specifically at the bridge in this video. The remaining types of networks are not of interest at this moment to us, but you should be aware of the fact that there are other possible ways of networking support available in Docker. The bridge itself is the default way of connecting containers in Docker, and the bridge supports the default network driver. And when we created the user-defined network, we didn't specify that it is a bridge, so by default a bridge gets created. Now let's examine the bridge in more detail. If you are familiar with networking, then you know that a bridge is a link layer device which forwards traffic between the various network segments, and so it can be either implemented as a hardware or a software device. Now in Docker's case, of course, it is implemented as a software device. Now we have seen already in the previous video how the default bridge is automatically implemented by Docker, and any container that you launch in Docker is automatically connected to this default bridge. Now the drawback of this is that all the containers can see each other under these circumstances. If you want further isolation among the containers that belong to your application, then it is better to implement your own user-defined bridge. So a user-defined bridge, as we saw, is created using the Docker network create command, as we have seen in the previous video. So the user-defined bridge has its own advantages. One of the features of a user-defined bridge is that it provides automatic DNS resolution between containers. So if you specify a name to a container, the container can be addressed using that name, and that is automatically translated by the user-defined bridge into the equivalent IP address of the container and the corresponding port number. So that is why we are able to implement our application with the Express server and the MongoDB server both running on the user-defined network, and the Express server will be able to address the MongoDB server just by using its name as MongoDB. In a later exercise, we will see how we actually implement the Express server itself. Another advantage of user-defined bridges is that it provides better isolation among the containers. And as I mentioned, if you launch a container without specifying the net option, then the container by default gets connected to the default bridge network. So if you define your own user-defined network, then you can connect your specific containers to the user-defined network, and these containers will be isolated from the remaining containers that do not belong to your application. And also, you can attach and detach containers on the fly from user-defined networks. We haven't seen this aspect in the exercise earlier, but we will revisit that at a later stage. And we have already seen the use of the Docker network create command to define a user-defined network. If you no longer need the network, then you can delete that by saying Docker network remove the name of your user-defined network. And we have also seen how we connect a container to a user-defined bridge by specifying the minus minus net or minus minus network option and then specifying the name of your user-defined network. Or if you want to connect it on the fly, you can also connect it by saying Docker network connect and specify the name of the network and the name of the container that you want to connect to that network. And similarly, disconnect from the user-defined bridge. With this quick overview of Docker networking and in particular the use of the user-defined bridge, let's move on to the next exercise.